So, so thank you, Ben, for being here this evening. Ben is the founder of Rubber City Reuse, local company specializing in composting of food scraps and yard waste. He is a former chef and served as board chair for Akron Cooperative Farms from 2018 to 2022. He currently volunteers in the locomotive shop for the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad. Ben is active in multiple historic preservation efforts around Northeast Ohio. Ben has a BA from the University of Akron and graduated from Wadsworth High. He lives in Akron's Canal Place downtown and regularly frequents anything CVNP related. You can find him hiking the towpath from downtown any given day with his beagle named Frank.
I love that.
Welcome, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and chat with you guys. Yeah, today I'm going to talk a little bit about composting, and I could tell by the conversation beforehand, we've got some pros here, so I'll go over kind of some of the basic stuff. You know what I mean? It never hurts to assume, but yeah, well then we'll just kind of get into a little discussion. It's kind of the evening, so I won't hit you death by PowerPoint. You know what I mean? We're not in class today. And but yeah, we'll talk some composting, maybe some strategies, and yeah, kind of what we do. So yeah, let's see here. Presentation wise, I have a little slide deck though, if you want me to share it, or I can just chat is fine by me. You guys tell me what you think.
If you have something, it would be great.
Yeah. Let's see here. I'll click share. It says I can't share while the other participant is sharing. Let's see.
I'm trying to get there. Hold on.
Oh, all good.
Sorry. There we go.
So what I'll do. Oh, I can just oh, cool. Okay. In just a moment, bring this up here. Share my screen. Yeah, let's do that. Cool. Okay. So can you guys see my screen okay? I'm gonna switch over to the little PowerPoint here.
There you go.
Are you seeing it?
Yes,
Okay.
but we also see us.
Oh yeah.
We also see several slides, not just one slide. It almost looks like you're on a phone.
I am mobile. I'm
Uh,
guilty of that. Let's see here.
Do you want us, can you email it to us real quick and I can
Yeah. Yeah, let's
share
do
it?
that. Yeah. What's the email you want me to share it to real quick?
Wild Ones Greater Cleveland at Gmail.
Perfect.
As fun it would be to watch whoever's talking pop up on a screen.
Stop sharing here.
We'll get it figured out.
Yeah, email it. Let me know if you get it.
I got it.
Oh, cool. Okay, cool. If you guys want, in the meantime, I'll kind of tell you a little bit about like Rubber City, how we got started, a little bit about me, kind of give you a little bio background. Yeah, like it said, I was a chef for 8 years in Los Angeles, and people always ask me how I got into composting. It's kind of life classic crazy story. Yeah, I was a chef in LA for 8 years, grew up in Wadsworth, moved out there right after high school. And I had a food truck for a while, and I got my food truck down to just um, plastic waste and food scraps. And then there was this company that started out there called Compostable LA or Compost LA, and they started taking my food scraps. Fast forward a couple years, when I moved home, um, I was reading Crane's Business Cleveland, and they kind of did like a "Where Are They Now" thing, and they were discussing Rust Belt Riders, who's up in the Cleveland area, who does what we do. And they were chatting a little bit about how they got started, and I was like, "Oh wow, I remember they were doing that in Los Angeles," and I thought, well, I wonder if I could do that in Akron. So I actually called them up, and I said, "Hey, do you have any plans on doing what you do down in Akron?" And they said, "No, no, yeah, plenty busy up here." And I said, "Well, hey, could I come? Could I come learn from you?" And they said, "Yeah, come on up." So I went up. I spent a couple days just kind of chatting them up, seeing how things go, seeing how it works, some of the pitfalls to watch out for. And I came home, and later that night, I bought an old pickup truck from like Appalachia, Ohio, and I drove it home for like $500. It overheated twice on me, and but we got it home, got it fixed up, and got a couple buckets, and just kind of started a little website. Started working there at Akron Cooperative Farms, composting there. Fast forward, we just celebrated 5 years in business. We've got like 5 employees now. None of the trucks overheat anymore. We've even got 2 new cars. We even just bought our first electrical car, which is kind of cool. And we'll use that for like route supervision and customer care, things like that. So we're trying to be as sustainable as possible, vehicle wise. But yeah, we service everyone from households to large corporations. We started actually service wise right before the pandemic. So it was kind of a bummer. We literally got our first customer in February of 2020. And that was a commercial cafeteria that then closed down 2 months later. So it was a little scary moment there, a little touch and go in the beginning. And so we kind of made a decision to pivot to meeting folks where they were, which was at home. So we started getting the 5-gallon buckets and the lids and started doing, we call it curbside service, where you fill your bucket up with food scraps throughout the week. And then we swap it out for a clean new bucket once a week on Fridays. And so we started doing that, which was really cool. It got us a little notoriety because, the hot topic was what are businesses doing to kind of pivot. We won an award through the Greater Akron Chamber, which was cool, for their Grit Award, which was really neat for our pivot to residential. And it probably wasn't the best financial wise to do in the beginning, but 5 years in now, we've got it. It's working well, and our commercial customers have come back as well, which is really cool. But like I said, we service anyone from little households to places like Akron Children's Hospital. We compost all their food scraps from their central cafeteria, things like that. And yeah, so we operate mainly in Summit County, but we also service Portage, a little bit of Medina, and Stark County as well. And then anyone kind of north, we just usually refer to Rust Belt for service. So then the presentation I have here today is just a little bit about composting at home. So people always ask me, why I advocate so much for people to compost at home when I, literally have a service that, pays to compost for you. And the reason being, while it's an old technique, people have been composting for a very long time. It's also great because most of our customers already compost. So we can take things because we use kind of like a larger commercial process. And all that really means is we just use a big giant pile instead of like a small one like you have at home. And so we can get our piles hotter. We can kind of engineer them temperature wise to kill things like viruses. And so when people ask what we can take, I tell them we can take everything, but no liquids, no oils, liquids just because they're a mess, and oils for obvious reasons. But people always ask, what about bones? And yeah, we can even take bones. So one of my big challenges to myself was to I'm a fan of the Costco rotisserie chicken, and was to see how quick I could compost and like decompose that whole kind of Costco chicken, and got it down, and no issues. And I always tell people as a side note, if you ever got to get rid of a body, don't bury it, don't throw it in the water, compost it. It'll give it a couple months, it'll be gone. But anyways, so here's the presentation I have about composting home. Like I said, I'm sure you guys know a lot about composting. Side note, you guys were all talking about what flowers you have blooming right now, and the flower I have most blooming is thistle. It's looking great right now in my yard and at the yard where we compost, and it's just got lovely little purple flowers all over the place. Taller than the corn is right now, so the thistle's thriving. But yeah, so to the presentation, composting. What is composting? Composting is a natural process of decay and change organic wastes into a valuable humus-like material called compost. And as an aside note, when we started, we called ourselves composters and micro haulers. The industry is moving towards the term organics recycler, and we like that because it kind of broadens the scope. I do still get people saying like, yeah, recycling, it's not a very organic process. And I kind of got to correct them. Organics means anything. If it grows, it goes. So not just yard waste, but you can compost, animal renderings. Yard waste is the big one. So you see the brown paper bags a lot of times on people's curbs. We're currently trying to work through a couple processes with a couple municipalities to collect that for them. And then obviously compost your yard waste. So these are some of the essential, obviously, ingredients in compost. Compost is an aerobic process, which means it needs air. The reason it needs air is because bacteria are really doing all the heavy lifting, and they're living things just like we are. So they need air, water, food, and they need a good temp. So they are thermophilic bacteria, so they like it hot. As another little side note, which you'll get plenty from me, right now we are actually working to see what we can do tax-wise as an organics recycler, because just kind of like how worm farmers a few years ago were able to become classified as livestock farmers, we are kind of the same as in composters. So our livestock is bacteria. We want to grow our herd. We want our herd to become more resilient. We want it to have offspring. We want it to become strong and healthy. And we need to take care of that. And the reason we take care of our bacteria, because it does all the work. And so we even watch for certain things that are naturally antibacterial, like, well, you don't get it a lot, but eucalyptus or pine have natural antibiotic properties. And while they won't, kill off our compost pile, they will, obviously bring the temperature down, when our goal is to keep it as high as we really can without going too high to where we're destroying nutrients. So yes, so air, water, food, which is the carbon and nitrogen from the food scraps and the yard waste. And that's how we'll even take some of the finished compost, by the way, that's cured or curing, and introduce that back into kind of stage one, if you will. And the reason we do that, because the bacteria in the finished compost are going to be stronger, more mature, more resilient than, let's say, the bacteria that are just colonies that are just forming in stage one. And they'll kind of work together to, I guess, teach, if you will, the young bacteria. And yeah, that's what we'll do. Why compost yard and kitchen waste? So this is 2017, but if anything, maybe it dipped a little bit after the pandemic. Maybe it increased, especially with kitchen waste, more people at home. I'm not sure. But 58 million tons of yard and kitchen waste go to landfills in the United States every year. Just in the state of Ohio, almost 4 million tons. And the county of Summit, we were able to really break it down. 43,000 tons. City of Akron alone, 20,000 tons. and yearly. And, one of the main reasons we don't want organic material to go to landfills is because obviously landfill space is limited. But the main reason is greenhouse gases. So when yard and food waste or organic matter go to a landfill, so we use, like I said, an anaerobic process in our bacteria to break the food and materials down. In a landfill, those materials become anaerobic. And the reason being, if you've ever seen a video of how a landfill works, that tractor right there in that picture in particular has special tires, kind of, if you will, with spikes on them. And its whole goal is to take the material that comes from the garbage truck and compact it as tightly as possible, layer after layer after layer after layer, till you have a mountain. And what that does is it deprives the material of oxygen, so it can't break down properly. So it almost like festers in the landfill. And when that happens, the bacteria can't do their job appropriately to break the material down. And so you get the byproduct methane. Methane is, we know, roughly 80 times more warming pound for pound than CO2. So when people love to talk about greenhouse gases and global warming, we like to focus on CO2. But if we really want to talk about the real silent killer, that would be methane. And for the longest time, we believed the biggest methane emitters were pipelines, actually, oil pipelines. And the reason is they will blow the methane off as a byproduct when pressures get too high. But now we've done, actually, New York Times, an awesome article a couple months ago, where, I forget the university, but they flew a plane over the 10 largest landfills in America. So the 10 biggest landfills in America, they flew a plane over them. It had these sensors that detect methane leaks that the oil companies use to find leaks on their pipelines. They use the same instruments. And they found that out of the 10 largest landfills in America, 4 of them were also the largest greenhouse gas emitters in the country, not just landfills, in general. And that was really, really eye-opening. So when you talk about why keep green waste out of landfills, because it's single-handedly probably the most destructive thing we can send to landfills, believe it or not. People like to think batteries, things like that. Of course, we need to watch leachate and groundwater runoff. But the methane plumes that come from landfills is really detrimental. And yeah, so that's one reason that composting at home can be so important and why we teach it as well. This is just kind of a breakdown of the municipal solid waste production in the US. So if you take food waste, yard trimmings, now wood, that includes engineered wood. And obviously you don't want to compost engineered wood for multiple reasons. Engineered wood is things like yellow wood, treated lumber, things like that. But if you just take yard trimmings and food waste alone, paper as well, obviously there's a lot of papers you can compost. You're looking at almost 29%, 28% of all waste is compostable that we're sending to landfills. So over a quarter, which is really incredible because, we think plastics, but yard trimmings, more yard trimmings go to landfills than plastics. And that really kind of shocked me as well because plastics, just in my eyes, are kind of, the enemy. They are just the antithesis of what we try and do in reuse. And, obviously we know the shortcomings with plastics recycling, but yard trimmings really kind of threw me back when I saw that. It is nice to see that a lot of people are rewilding their yards. Summit Metro Parks, for example, has a program where they will give you a little sign. I think they'll even give you some coaching and probably some wildflower seeds, something like that. But I've been seeing the signs pop up all over, and I love it because people are kind of letting their backyards grow a little more. And people are becoming aware of the spraying and things like that, and the mowing to get rid of the yard trimmings and then sending them off to a landfill is just definitely not best practice for the 21st century, in my opinion. So yeah, this is a breakdown of the solid waste here in the US. And I think that's 2017 as well. So what do you need to make compost? You got your decomposers, like I spoke a minute ago about the thermophilic bacteria, but then fungi as well. So fungi fungi are super important and kind of do more of the material breakdown. They can do a lot of the heavy lifting. And you got to watch, actually, there can be some really gnarly funguses that grow in compost piles. And we didn't know that when we started. And one day I was like, boy, I just don't feel right when I stand around this thing. And we found out all about these fungi that get in your lungs. And luckily we have immune systems. But bacteria and fungi, the food for the decomposers, that's the organic materials to be composted. And then the right amount of air, water, and warmth to keep the crew happy. So that's one question people ask me a lot is, and I hear this all the time. I tried composting, but I wasn't any good at it. And so I have to say, first off, that's the wrong way to look at it. The fact that you're trying it is a win, and you're doing great just trying. But it's really not overly complicated. If you kind of keep roughly to like a 30-to-1 ratio of browns to greens, which I'll talk about here in the next couple slides, you'll kind of get the feel for it as well. And it's kind of funny. Your diet will kind of will take on the personality of, or your compost pile will take on the personality of your diet. So, but yeah, on the next slides here, I'll talk about some of the browns, greens, things like that. Where do decomposers come from? So our worms, our bacteria, our fungi, they come from the soil. One of the reasons we reintroduce the cured compost back into like stage 1. Leaves for some reason have a lot of natural fungi that grow on them, almost like a little shield of armor. Food scraps are great for bacteria, the high nitrogen load. Manure as well. Manure is a great way to really pick up the temperature of your compost pile, really kind of give it a boost. We don't use manure. We don't really need it. We get enough food scraps. And I really only advise, just because animal feed's not really the best. If you're going to use some type of manure in your compost at home, use it just for like a mulch additive or fluffer or nutrient additive and flower beds. I wouldn't, if you do manure, I wouldn't recommend using it in food production, if that makes sense. Antibiotics are another reason as well. Antibiotics will show up in our soil testing, which is wild if we use manure. And then, yeah, like I said, the finished compost. And then these are some commercial additives. We don't necessarily recommend these as well. There's a lot of organic boosters out there. You know, they're not like chemicals per se. And they're not bad. Again, kind of back to the manure thing. If you're going to use these, I wouldn't recommend using them in food production. But these are a couple examples. My sister uses Dr. Earth. She doesn't mind it. And so here's some materials to avoid when at home. So you always hear people say you don't want to compost meats and dairy at home. I'll go along with it, but if I'm being honest, the biggest thing with meats is obviously you want to watch for virals, things like salmonella and things like that. But Mother Nature, she's really kind of built in to help fight that stuff. She's got an immune system just like we do. And if you think of it this way, and I've seen salmonella it can infect plants just like it can humans. And they wilt, they get sick just like humans do. But it kind of stops short. So I'm torn when it comes to this because the impact that it still makes going to a landfill. And this might not be the most popular opinion, but maybe that little patch of grass around your compost pile, maybe that's the lamb we have to sacrifice, so to speak, to keep it out of landfills. So I don't know. It's personal preference, but I will say this: cheese can really heat your pile up really well. So, but things to put in, you want to put, fruits, veggies. Coffee grounds are awesome. They're pretty much as close to finished compost as you can get some sort of food scrap. And then, yeah, on the right, it's got an example of weeds as well. If you get your pile hot enough, it will kill the weed seeds. It's going to be really tough to get that pile that hot at home. We can at our facilities, but it kind of falls back to what are you going to use it for afterwards? So, yeah. Shredding material. The reason we would recommend shredding material in your compost piles is because while we still want pockets of air, we still want kind of a semi-crumbly material to break down. We also want the most surface coverage that we can get. So think that apple core, that wood chip, that whatever we're putting into our compost pile, the smaller we can get it, the better. The reason the smaller we can get it, that means more surface area. The more surface area means it's touching the other things around it more. The more it's touching the other things around it, the quicker the bacteria and fungi can grow and transfer from item to item, therefore increasing the heat because they're breaking down, they're working faster, more efficient. So shredding material is really great, especially if you're going to use paper in your compost pile. Paper is a great carbon source. Shred it up first, especially like newspapers, things like that. Even though they're thin, shred them up first, and you'll get much better results. Kind of like I was talking earlier, my slides are a little out of order, but browns are carbon-rich materials. Think crinkly, dry. Leaves are a great carbon source, but only when they're brown. So leaves are one of the few things that like go nitrogen to carbon. When they're green, they're nitrogen. When they're brown, crinkly, and dry, they're going to be a carbon. Greens, nitrogen rich, so food scraps. If you don't have a treated lawn, you still want to collect your lawn clippings though, instead of blowing them on the sidewalk or whatever. Grass is really can get a compost pile really hot. And if you grow corn, by the way, in the fall, once you harvest your corn, chip up those corn stalks, and boy, it's like silage. It gets hot, and it will really cook your compost pile. And those corn stalks would be considered greens, by the way. And that says 1-to-3 ratio. That should really say 1-to-30. But in my experience, honestly, for what you're going to produce at home, closer to like a 1-to-15 ratio, 1-to-20 ratio. And that's going to be 1 being the nitrogen or your greens. And then the larger number, whatever kind of works for you. Again, like I said, according to your diet, that'll kind of take on your personality. If you're just a big coffee drinker and you're dumping 5 pounds of coffee grounds in there a day, you're going to use a little less nitrogen. But yeah, you want to get a good ratio going. And the trick is to kind of obviously fold it in from the center out. So you're putting your new stuff into the core of the pile, working the old stuff out towards the edges. And if you get your pile big enough, actually, we did this little study down at OSU ATI last fall. It was really cool on the chimney effect that a compost pile can make. And we kind of designed these compost piles to be way more vertical, or kind of as vertical as we can get, because we found that just like a fire, the compost piles were sucking in oxygen at the base and expelling heat out like the top, kind of like a little volcano. So as you're making your pile, think kind of as round or as steep as you can get it. Some more examples of browns, leaves. Straw is a decent brown, but I'm going to tell you right now, straw is tough. And unless your pile is really hot, and moisture is key with straw, I wouldn't recommend it. Straw, it just takes forever to break down. And at home, unless you've got like a family of 20 and the kids just waste every meal, you're just not going to generate really enough food scraps to break down straw. So, but you can also see kind of the ratios there. It's much higher. Paper, sawdust is great. Sawdust is going to increase that surface area, like I said, but then you've also got to watch, because kind of on the flip side, conversely, sawdust also can compact and can kind of make like just a thick brick-like material where the oxygen isn't getting in as well too. So if you do use sawdust, it's great, but use it sparingly, because you can oversaturate and compact, and then your pile can get anaerobic. And that's a telltale sign of when your pile gets anaerobic, is it will smell very ammonia-y, or almost like kind of like a cat pee, to be honest. And that's again, that ammonia smell is a byproduct of improper breaking down. So that can happen with sawdust quite a bit. But Animal bedding mixed with manure. While I said we don't really take straw or manure, one of our customers that we do work with, RCR, is the Akron Zoo. So we take all their animal bedding, and it's quite a bit. And we will make like our own non-organic piles. They're off-site, which is kind of cool. So they give us a little area to do it. And then in turn, the compost that we make from that, they then mix with their mulch every spring. And so if you go to the Akron Zoo and you're like, man, the flowers look damn good around here. It's full cycle right there. We call it royal poop because we'll get like lion, and they all have to have their own bins too, because that was the big sticking point for the vets at the zoo, was they don't want any cross contamination. So the thing we're collecting, like the lion animal bedding in, cannot go to the ostrich exhibit, for example. They all have to have their own toters for the straw. And so it's kind of cool though. The giraffes are coming this it's kind of a gross conversation, I guess, but the giraffes are coming this fall, so we're excited to see what giraffe poops look like, because we know what lion is now, wolf, all these different things, and so we're interested to see what a giraffe animal bedding looks like. But yeah, some examples of greens, nitrogen. Vegetable scraps, obviously. Coffee grounds, again, are awesome. They are the rock star of the compost world. We don't do a lot of free stuff. I mean, we do a lot of in-kind services for nonprofits, but in terms of like just regular for-profit commercial customers, coffee shops are one of the only customers we will actually, if I can fit them on a route, we'll collect their stuff for free. It is just so nitrogen packed. It is so moist. It is so kind of like sawdusty like, that we will, if a coffee shop is on the route, one of our routes already, and a truck drives by every day, I will go into that coffee shop and we will offer to pick their stuff up for free, which is kind of cool. So if you drink coffee at Akron Coffee Roasters, or what's their place on Front Street in Falls? I forget, but both of those places are there. Casava or Cava
Asterisk?
Coffee in Barberton.
Asterisk, maybe?
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
I couldn't think of it
Yeah.
either. Good job, Aaron.
I wonder why you called one Akron Coffee Roasters and that. Why didn't you just call that Cuyahoga Falls Coffee Roasters? Or I don't know. But yeah, we'll pick up their stuff because coffee grounds are great. Grass clippings again. Just watch. I don't know if this is the crowd that treats their lawn, but if you do, I would not recommend grass clippings. Forever chemicals are a very real thing, and we are learning so much about them. And we are learning very quickly that our yards are major contributors. So, but yeah, those are some examples of greens. Just a little more detail about them. Greens and browns. You can see there, greens obviously are going to have poor aeration because of the liquids, the moisture in them. The browns are going to decay more slowly. Browns are also important, not just as our carbon ingredient, but yeah, because they are coarser and a little more rough, they'll give us those air pockets I was talking about previously when I was telling you about sawdust. So think leaves, they're crinkly, they're all uneven. Another reason they're great is because they help with the aeration. So yeah, there's just a few different things about browns and greens in detail. Oh, side note, if you do keep your grass and you got like, I got enough nitrogen, anytime you can let something sit before you add it to your compost pile, I mean, other than like nitrogen, like greens, but your browns, the longer you can kind of let them sit, like the better. We'll take in leaves from city of Cuyahoga Falls and we'll sit on them like a year before we add them into our pile, just because by the time we add them, like Mother Nature's beat them up already, but they're still kind of coarse and they're great. If you can age your browns, the more the better. And then yeah, just a little bit like what is aerobic composting. Like I said earlier, that's the introduction of oxygen, or the breaking down of material with oxygen. If you're doing it right, no foul odors. That's one thing people always ask me is, oh, how bad do your compost piles stink? And I'm like, well, not really, because they're cooking hot. So a lot of the stink, if you will, is kind of being cooked off. The only time we will get them where they'll be a little stinky is if we get like a heavy snowstorm and that snow kind of sits on top and insulates the piles. It'll get them almost too moist in the wintertime. It doesn't stop the process, by the way. People always think like, oh, it gets cold out, the pile must stop decomposing. Not at all. In fact, they're so hot. If we get a snowstorm, our compost piles will like stick out in a big sea of white because, you know, just like if the ground is too warm in early fall or early winter and it'll be snowing, but it won't stick to the ground. That's kind of how our compost piles are, no matter how cold it gets outside. But with wintertime, they will get a little too moist. So aerobic composting and temperature. This is so active composting. Yeah, 55, I would say, but yeah, it's a little low. You want to go 100 plus, to be honest, if you're really trying to make compost in less than 10 decades. But we will get our piles, for example. So after you go past like 150, 145 degrees, the heat will start, you get kind of a trade-off where, yeah, you'll start breaking the material down real quick, but your nutrient load and trace minerals will kind of start to be burnt off. So because our goal is, yeah, we want to engineer some really good soils, our goal is also, because we have caps through the EPA, we can only have so much per site. Our goal is to break it down as quickly as possible. And so we will get our piles up to about 180. The hottest I ever got the core of my pile, according to my Rio temp thermometer, I got one of my piles up to like 208 one time in the core, and that was really cool. But you got to watch, because with our piles, they will get so hot. We've really got to watch contamination. So if you think of like a crock pot, what a crock pot does to like a rack of ribs after like a day of cooking. So our compost piles will be just as hot, if not hotter. And instead of, you know, a couple hours, it will be over the course of weeks, months. And so we've got to watch contamination, because our piles will get so hot over such a long period of time, they will melt plastic. And we didn't realize that at first until when I started. I was probably a year in, and I started noticing like these, you know, just like chunks of plastic. I'm like, what? Obviously it's plastic, but what was this? What, you know, where the hell did this come from? It's plastic bottles. Plastic bottles will melt in our compost piles, and they turn into like a puddle of polymer. And yeah, anyways, that's a little bit about temperatures and compost piles. At home, if you can get your compost pile up to 120 degrees, you are a rock star. You're doing great. Anywhere between 100 and 120, you know, you're going to get the decomposition that you want. And if you think over the course of a year, you'll have compost by springtime for your flowers, or fall, however you kind of set it up. This shows a little bit about what I was talking about, some of the chimney effect that we were looking into. And you're going to see air in at the bottom, air out at the top. So when you think of how you're building your compost pile, keep that in mind. Keep that in mind, and keep it as open as you can. A lot of those, you know, composting bins that you can get commercially, they're not bad. They're not bad. If you do go that route, by the way, get ones with multiple chambers. The single chamber composters, in my opinion, are, you know, kind of silly, because you're always, you know, maybe every day, every other day, whatever, always adding new material. So if we're always adding new material to one chamber and breaking it down, well, when do we give it a break and kind of move it to the next step of, you know, curing or getting ready to apply to our garden without applying it with a fresh chunk of apple in there or something? So if you can, think multi-chamber, and the more vents, the more way for air to get in, the better. And this is just kind of an example of how you can increase porosity. The pipes work pretty good. We used to do this for a while. There was this old brickyard kind of by our yard in Mogador, and we went back in there and found a bunch of PVC pipe, and we cut holes in it, and we were doing that for a while. And I won't lie, it worked great. It looked like we had like little smokestacks in the wintertime. It was really cool, because the steam was just pouring out the top of them, which was cool. You know, we knew it was cooking. The problem was, when we would go to turn the piles, you know, the Bobcat is not the most gentle when it comes to a plastic pipe. And we found that it didn't really break it down quick enough for us to we like to be lazy and just sit on the tractor when we turn them piles. Let me just put it that way. But at home, these pipes, they're great. Drill a couple holes in the bottom, or just use the hole at the other end of the pipe. You don't even have to drill. And they'll help you out a lot too. Now, this shows it coming from the top. I would actually recommend coming in from the sides. The reason being, we're trying to draw air in with these pipes, and we know air comes in more from the bottoms and the sides. So if you're going to use this pipe method, I would recommend like coming in horizontally with your pipe at the bottom of the pile and only going to like the core. Obviously, you don't want to go all the way through the pile, but kind of go to the core and go horizontally with the pipes if you're going to go that way. But yeah, corn stalks are great too. That mentions corn stalks there, but yeah, water is important. Bacteria are living things. They like to drink water, and the hotter they get, just like us, we can relate with this heat wave. The hotter it gets, the more we want water. And so when you think summertime, you're going to want to water a little more. Cool thing is we have a pond by all our compost piles. The EPA mandates that we try to control our leachate, which is just a silly term they created for anytime water touches a compost pile. But anyways, so we went ahead, we collected it in a little pond that we lined with clay, and that leachate and rainwater that we collect is also what we water our piles with. So we don't draw from a well, we don't use city water. We use pure captured rainwater that's already, to a degree, almost like compost tea. So it's great. It's already packed with that bacteria. I would not swim in this pond, by the way. It is pretty gnarly. Snapping turtles seem to love it, which is cool. They're fine. But yeah, we'll reuse that water. And that's how we water our piles. Pile content should be 40 to 60%. That's pretty, yeah, I would say closer to 60%, to be honest. Again, you just want to watch. You don't want to get, overly wet where you're making like a sludge and it starts to smell like ammonia. But very rarely, if you've got to water manually, and you're adding it, let's say you do overwater, by the way, just add more browns. They're good for soaking that stuff up. Don't add greens. But it's kind of hard to overwater a compost pile. Most people underwater, if anything. Yeah. Taking care of your compost. Obviously the mixture of browns and greens, regularly turning. People ask me a lot about like what's when, how often should I turn my compost pile? Well, that's going to completely depend on your compost pile. So again, like I said, your food or your compost pile will take on the personality of what you eat, or from what you eat rather. And so if you want to go by temperature, but not everyone has a thermometer. Temperature wise, when the temperature drops, I usually say like around 100 to 110. For our piles, at least, you'll want to turn. So as it cools down, that means the process is slowing. So we want to turn it to reintroduce that oxygen to speed it back up. Roughly once a week. If you set aside, hey, every Saturday morning I go and pull weeds from my gardens. It's a little thing I do. Well, every Saturday, add turning your compost pile to it as well. You'll be fine. You can't really overturn it. I mean, I guess you can, but if you stick to once a week, you'll be fine. Side note, if we got some permaculturists here, I always like to tease. Permaculture is just like lazy composting. Vermiculture. We just make a pile of food scraps and browns, and we don't ever turn it. We just let the worms do their thing. So you can also go that route. When I first was learning compost, I made a little pile, and I thought, well, how long, if I just break it down? It made really good stuff, and the worms loved it because they kind of moved in at their own speed. If you think about it. But roughly once a week, turning your compost pile will be fine. Making compost the fast way. Obviously, I wouldn't even say this is the fast way. This is just how you make compost morning. During the first few weeks, temperatures reach under 40. It's gonna be tough to get that at home. It's gonna be tough to get that at home. If you get 120 at home, be super stoked because you're doing great. Yeah, like I said, every week, 5 to 7 days. So compost is finished. I always tell folks it should be kind of like dry Play-Doh. So if you grab like a handful of it, if like Play-Doh, we leave it out, it's still kind of malleable, but it also crumbles. That's what you want. You want an earthy smell. You don't want any ammonia or nonsense. And kind of like if you're baking a cake and you put the toothpick in and it comes out clean, that cake's done. Kind of same deal for compost. You take your shovel and you like stick it in the pile, pull it out, and your shovel comes out pretty clean. She's probably finished. And once it's finished though, let it sit. The reason we cure the compost is what we call it for a couple months is if you think of finished compost, well, yes, it's finished, everything's broke down. It is just packed full of nutrients, like packed. And you could, if you apply it too soon, you could burn your plants. You could nitrogen burn them, which is when the leaves kind of turn brown and kind of like curl in from the edges to it's from too much nitrogen. So we let it cure. And another reason we do that is because the compost will actually be more efficient at what it does if we let it cure. If you were to look at like, let's say like a graph, if we had fresh compost, it's going to be like a sugar high. You're going to see a big spike in nutrients followed by a pretty decent drop off as well, like kind of like a sugar high. So what we want is we want a nice gentle curve that stays at its apex for a long time and then slowly, gradually comes back down to normal. Cured compost is what will do that for you. So when your compost is done, just let it sit, literally let it sit for like a month. And some people even come out and like turn their cured compost once in a while. Can't hurt. But also kind of keep it covered. The sun can zap a lot of nutrients really quick. So while it's curing, leave it covered for a little bit. Yeah. Simple tests, bag test, leave it for several days, produce no foul odor. This is a good one. I would refer more to the shovel. If you really want bags of compost sitting around your house, that's fine. But yeah,
Hey,
shovel's
Ben,
better.
just so you know,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to cut you off at 8. Is there
Oh yeah,
is
absolutely.
there a certain slide you want me to go to, or you just want me to keep going?
Nope, this is great.
We're good. Okay.
In fact, if you'd like, we'll just do a Q&A now if that's cool. I think we kind of get the gist. And if anyone's got any questions, I'd love to answer them. Any questions about your compost at home or about what we do at RCR, about taco recipes. I've got a great whiskey marinated steak that I cover with a sriracha aioli. We can chat about that. But any questions, please let me know in the chat or just chat them out.
I'm gonna go.
So- Bill,
ahead.
I was about to say, Bill, why don't you cover the possible recommendations, since most of these are homeowners, where might be a good spot? Because I did see that one slide as we passed by it, so that might be good to just cover with the group.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, good spot. Keep it away from the house. For simple reasons, you just don't, you don't want a pile of rotting stuff next to your house. I like to put them somewhere a few feet out from like a tree line. So sun is great, but sun can also beat our compost up and rob us of a lot of nutrients. And then rain conversely can wash them away. But we also need sun. We also need rain for our compost to thrive. So if you've got like some woods or a few trees, a few feet away from those trees, if you don't have that, a lot of times folks will have sheds. Put it on, I mean, depending on where your house, put it on where you're going to get like, I think 50% shade. So we got a lot of flower growers here. So yeah, 50% sun or whatever is usually the best place. A lot of people will put them on the side of their garages. I see like when I'm out in suburbs a lot of times. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, another thing that people always ask about animals. That's a big concern, especially like in the suburbs. You're gonna have a lot of animals, raccoons, things like that. I know and again, this is probably a controversial opinion, but people like to say, keep your trash cans closed and stuff so raccoons stay wild. Raccoons, for example, have been eating our trash for thousands of years. You're in Northeast Ohio, you're not going to make any more or less of a wild raccoon if they get into your compost pile, if that makes sense. And at the end of the day, hey, they're just hungry little guys.
Well, that picture, he looks so cute.
They are cute and they're really, really smart. But when they do get into our bins, let's say at our yard, they make an absolute mess. If you've ever watched a raccoon eat, they use their little hands and fingers and nibble away at stuff. But their favorite thing to do is they put the food down and they like roll it like they're rolling dough to mush it so they can get like the seeds and stuff out of the. Anyways, they will do that and it just makes just a horrible mess. Horrible mess.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And people always ask too about like rats. I see rats on there. I've never once had rats. You got to remember these compost piles are hot. So, you know, if I'm like a little mouse and the core of my compost pile is 130 degrees, I don't want to be in 130 degrees just like that mouse doesn't. So, people always ask me like, do they burrow into your piles? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. It's, you know, it's 180 degrees in there. I wouldn't be in there. And even then, like they don't locate nearby and get, you know, we're required by law. We have to tip our bins within 48 hours. But no, the biggest thing is raccoons. Raccoons. But you know, what are you gonna do?
Well, my kitchen scrap contains a regular supply of eggshells. And even
Oh yeah.
after the compost has cured, mixed, been turned for months, maybe even a whole year, you can still see the eggshell in the compost, even though everything else seems to have disappeared. Am I doing something wrong? Is that anything to be concerned with?
No, eggshells are just really durable. You know, they're like pure calcium, which we need. That's a great trace mineral. All I would say is you know, if it's a like a optics thing, you know, maybe bury them under the dirt once you apply your compost. But the thing that's going to break them down is going to be heat and moisture. So yeah, they're going to be tougher to break down at home. Obviously, we don't mind them at all. We will take entire like 96-gallon toters from like the Eye Opener in West Akron, just full of eggshells, just their eggshells on like a Sunday morning. And we can break them down because it's hotter and cooler. But best I can tell you at home is just try and break those eggshells down as much as you can. You know what I mean? Kind of maybe not necessarily grind them up. I mean, you could if you got a yard chipper, run them through there literally. It will chop them up. But you know, do the old maybe toss a couple in a Ziploc bag and roll a can of soup over it. You know what I mean? Like if you're crushing nuts, just get it as fine as you possibly can. And then, like I said, if it's an optics thing, just scoot it under the dirt a little bit. Side note, with eggshells, you're not going to get as much nitrogen as you would with a pure, like, let's say apple core. So like when I was talking earlier about, you know, we want to break this stuff down so it's not a huge spike in nitrogen. If you've got, you know, a chunk of eggshell, it's not going to give you the same spike in nitrogen, let's say like an apple core or something would. It's going to be, you're going to get more trace elements out of that, like iron, manganese, calcium. So, nope, nothing wrong. Not doing anything wrong with eggshells. They're great for your compost pile.
Does anybody
yeah,
else
here's some
have
of our
any
info.
questions? Yeah.
Yeah, and any questions too, always feel free to email, call, text, reach out. Love to have you. I know we were talking, I think maybe having you guys out sometime in July, which would be cool to come see kind of our process out there in Mogador. Might be a little trip, but it's a cute little village there on the east side of Akron. And if you come out, we took basically took over an old nursery, and there is a ton of apple trees. By the way, please get a hold of me if you'd like one. And we're giving away a bunch of apple trees. We don't really know what breed they are. They've been in pots for years, unfortunately. They could use a good pruning. Some are even growing apples in the pot, which is wild. But when this nursery kind of went out of business, a lot of plants were left over. And so we've got about 80 apple trees we're trying to give away. If anyone would like an apple tree, please just call or email me, and we'll get you a free apple tree. I think there's even like some plum and pear trees mixed in there too. They don't look like apples, but again, I don't know what they are.
I was about to
They're
say,
just
Ben,
there.
especially if they're native plum trees. I know several of our members that would love the native plum trees.
We might
Yeah,
need
no, please get a
some
hold of me.
ID.
Yeah, there's please get hold of me. There's no catch. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to wrangle you into service. Literally, I just feel so bad for these poor guys. I look at plants like I do like animals. And when you hear that Sarah McLachlan commercial coming on, the eyes of the angel and the dogs stand out in the rain, I swear that's how I feel when I look at these apple trees. I'm like, I'm sorry, dude. I'm gonna get you out of here. We're gonna bust you out, Free Willy. It's just I've got 4 already at my place, and I live in an apartment, so the building's kind of over the apple trees being planted downtown.
Well, we'll see
They
if
are.
we
They
can
told me to
help
stop.
find a home, Ben. So, and to your point,
Awesome.
we are definitely going to be working with Ben to finalize a day or two that we can go visit their facility. And we're also going to try to find a few other facilities in July or August in other counties as well. So that way it's convenient for several of our members to, visit a local facility with regards to
Cool.
composting. So thank you again
Yeah,
so
we'd love
much
to have
for
you.
your time, Ben.
Yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. And sorry about the little lapse there in the beginning with the presentation. I told you to begin with, I always botched the beginning. So, but thanks for having me. Really happy to be here. And have a great evening, everyone. I'm going to jump off.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Ben.
Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Bye-bye.